What up, Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast, wherever you are hailing in, or if you're listening to this in the car, on the way to work, you're at the gym, you're hustling, man. Wherever you are, thank you so much for taking a little bit of time out of your day to really study the art of crowdfunding. Now, crowdfunding is an art, but it's also a science. You know, when it comes to the art side, there's obviously certain products that do better than others. I think a lot of times we think of also like artistic categories like, you know, tabletop gaming and card games. We think about books and those kinds of things. But this obviously has more art into it. But at the same time, there's a lot of art when it comes to product development. And one of like my goals in starting this podcast back in 2015, now we've done hundreds of interviews, obviously over the years, interviewed $1 million crowdfunding creators. We've also interviewed smaller creators as well, you know, 100K and less when it comes to that, and a lot of different types of categories. My goal was to really get a really great array of different types of projects from many different walks of life. People who have, you know, come from nothing and they launch a campaign and it goes super viral, super big, and they're able to build a brand from scratch. Other people who are launching campaigns will have a little bit of experience as well in the industry, and they're doing a project and they really hit it big. They end up doing, for example, 700K, for example, with today's podcast guest. Today's podcast guest actually, you know, they raised over 700K from more than 11,000 backers, and they were able to make a career doing what they love, right? Which is so freaking cool, to be able to turn your passion into profit. So you're gonna hear a lot about that and the story of today's creator, as well as went into their successful campaign, some of the tactics, some of the strategy, some of the resources which they recommend, all the things that you're gonna need to know to really hit it big, right, when it comes to your crowdfunding campaign. But that being said, one of the things also that I really always wanted to do was to bring to you a guide, a step-by-step blueprint, so that anyone out there, whether you're starting from nothing, you don't have a big budget, or you have a really big budget and you want to put this in, you want to snowball this thing, wherever you are, whatever size creator you are, a blueprint which you can follow. And that's what I'm sharing with you today. So if you ever wanted to kind of boil this down into a formula, I have a great link that I want to share with you right now. And actually, Audible is doing an incredible promotion where you can get a free copy of the book I'm about to mention. All you got to do is sign up for a free 30-day trial of Audible. So if you want to check out that link, the link is crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. So that link will take you to my blueprint, the guide which I put together, the formula which I've decoded for you, called the Kickstarter Launch Formula. It is a great starting point for anyone out there that really wants to launch an effective crowdfunding campaign, no matter what category you are launching under. So again, that link is crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. That's crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. Crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio will take you there, and you can take advantage of that deal for however long it lasts. Now, man, I got other people that are like, Sal, that sounds great, you know, for people that are beginners who have never launched a campaign before. But what about us, like, who really want to, like, cutting edge when it comes to crowdfunding, who want the latest innovative tools and techniques and strategy? What's working today, right? The things that aren't working, you know, maybe a couple of years ago, the foundation behind it, but really like the most cutting edge material. Like, I want my fingers on that. I want to get my hands on that. If that sounds like you, dude, I got an incredible newsletter, which I send out every single week, called Killer Crowdfunding Tips. And that is exactly what it is. I compile my best tips, advice, techniques, the things that I'm discovering every single week, putting my fingers on the pearls and delivering that straight to your inbox. All you got to do is enter your name and email and subscribe and join my community, and you will get access to those incredible, valuable resources, which can potentially raise you thousands of dollars with a successful crowdfunding campaign. So if you want to check that out, go and check out my newsletter at crowdcrux.com/newsletter. Again, that link is crowdcrux.com/newsletter. Crowdcrux.com/newsletter will take you there, and you'll begin to start learning as soon as possible. So lastly, let's get into today's interview and let's really discover how this creator was able to raise $700,000 on Kickstarter from more than 11,000 backers. This one of the things that's important also I'll mention really quickly is that I think it's important to learn from many different examples. So when you're listening to today's interview, really take the time to understand the mindset of the creator. What worked well for them when it came to getting funding? What worked well for them when it came to the way they structured their campaign? Take it all with a grain of salt. Take some notes, because this is going to be a whopper of an interview, and it's coming up right after this. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. On today's show, we are speaking with a creator who has been able to launch multiple campaigns on Kickstarter. Their most recent one for Let's Go to Japan from AEG has attracted more than 11,000 backers and raised over $700K. And we are lucky enough to have the COO of the company here with us. Ryan, welcome to the show.
I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Definitely, man. So kind of getting started here, maybe you could just introduce yourself to the community a bit. I know you guys have done multiple campaigns. Maybe you can just shed some light on that intro and we can start there.
Sure. So I have been in the tabletop gaming business for a long time. I started in the early 1990s, and I've worked on a lot of projects, including Legend of the Five Rings. I was the vice president of tabletop role-playing games and the brand manager for Dungeons & Dragons at Wizards of the Coast when 3rd edition was released. I spent some time working in the video game industry. I worked for CCP, the people who make EVE Online. And then I came back to tabletop publishing, and I went to work with my buddy John Zinzer, who created a company called Alderac Entertainment Group back in the 90s when we both got our start in the tabletop industry. We've been running Kickstarters at Alderac Entertainment Group since 2017. And we've had, close to 10 campaigns, I think. We've raised something like $8 million overall. It has become a huge part of our business, and it's something that we are really proud of and something we spend a lot of time and energy on.
Congratulations on all of your success. To kind of, take your mind back to the early days a tiny bit, how did you end up hearing about Kickstarter and kind of what made you get involved with launching these campaigns?
I can remember the very first conversation I ever had about Kickstarter. I was at Gen Con, which is the big tabletop gaming event held every year in Indianapolis. And I was having a lunch meeting with a buddy of mine named Luke Peterschmidt. And Luke was explaining to me this crowdfunding idea. And the whole thing just sounded absolutely ludicrous. I couldn't for the life of me figure out why anybody would ever want to do it. And Luke convinced me that there was some pretty exciting things happening on the platform. So I found it and logged in, and I backed a couple of early projects just to kind of see what the heck was going on with it. And I was just astonished. I was very skeptical that a large audience of people would take the leap of faith to pay money up front for a product that they wouldn't get for an unknown amount of time, especially from unknown creators who maybe didn't have any kind of track record at all. So it was kind of delightful to discover that that was not true and that there really was a community there. And I think maybe 6 months or so after that conversation, I started having serious discussions with my business partners at the time at a company I was running called Goblin Works about doing a Kickstarter to help us fund a video game. And that was the first campaign that I ran, and that campaign was pretty successful. And then we ran a second campaign for that project about a year later, and we raised $1 million. So From the space of not even thinking it was possible to raising over $1 million was probably less than 2 years. So Kickstarter was something I was very skeptical about and then very happy to have encountered.
And for you, having built an audience, obviously having a lot of history when it comes to your industry, why do you continue to come back to the platform? Why is it something you continue to launch campaigns there?
Tabletop gaming as a business is different, I think, than a lot of other categories that are on Kickstarter or in crowdfunding in general, because tabletop gaming is certainly bigger than Kickstarter now. Tabletop crowdfunding is bigger than Kickstarter. There is now an audience of people in the millions who buy games on Kickstarter. They may not buy a lot of product elsewhere, and Kickstarter is just how they get new games. And I think that if you are a publisher in this space, you have to you have to have a crowdfunding strategy. Maybe your strategy is not to do it, but that's a strategy. And I think if you're not doing it, you're really missing out on a huge opportunity. I think there's just something that is a particularly good fit about the way that tabletop games are developed and the way that the timelines work and the prices, so that it's just a perfect fit for crowdfunding. And that's the reason I think that there's a lot of people now that just use a crowdfunding platform as their primary way to buy games. So for a company like AEG, we don't just view it as a way to raise the money, we view it as a way to sell to an audience that we might not otherwise be able to talk to.
Being able to develop games and like put out things that delight other people, like that's such a cool job, man, right? For you,
Yes,
what
it
do you
is.
what do you like? Yeah. What are you most passionate about when it comes to that? Is it like the crunch? You're being like more in operations. Is it the crunching of the numbers? Is it like efficiency? Is it the creative side? What do you connect with most when it comes to bringing these to light?
I've been doing this for a very long time, and I think that when you first get into being a publisher, the creative side of it, the idea side of it is really exciting. Everybody likes that feeling of having had an idea, making a rough prototype, and then seeing that thing turn into a real product. But over the long term, I think what you start to realize is that it's really a business about customer service, and it's a business about connecting with people.
Mm,
And we pride ourselves on spending a lot of time and effort trying to make really interesting and new, fun ways to play games. And we're not just trying to create another game. Every time we publish something, we're trying to create a new and unique experience. And
mhm,
that
mhm.
is really kind of what drives me and drives our whole company. Our tagline is "We make fun," and our goal is to give you an experience every time you open an AEG game and play it, that you walk away from that table thinking that your time was well spent. You really enjoyed yourself and you had a very good experience.
And I'm sure made lots of memories and bonding as well. Before we get into some like tips and advice for some of the community members and people in the audience, maybe you could just talk bite size about this most recent campaign which you launched and kind of clue us into the game which you raised money for.
Sure. The campaign we just finished was called Let's Go to Japan. It is designed by Josh Wood. Josh loves Japan, and he was planning a very detailed trip to Japan that he spent a lot of time working on just before COVID happened, and then he couldn't go.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of making that a negative, he turned it into a positive. And he came up with a really clever way to create a game about planning a trip to a place you've never been. It's one of those things that I think a lot of us have done, but some people really go and do a deep dive. And this game is like doing a deep dive where you are really thinking about all of the cool stuff you're going to do on your trip on a day by day basis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the game, the part of the game I think is really novel is that you do your trip. You've played the game. You've created a tableau of cards that represent all of the different places that you're going to visit while you're in Japan and all of the things that you do while you're there. And then each player kind of role plays their experience and talks about what they saw and what they did and how they experienced their trip. So it's not just a board game; it's also a little bit of a role playing experience, and it really makes it super fun. And very aspirational. I know a lot of people that have decided to go to Japan because they played this game.
It has beautiful artwork, and just looking down, like I love the thematic feel, and it looks so cool. And obviously, Japan is actually one of the places on my bucket list as well to go to.
Yep.
Out of curiosity, how long did it take you going from like idea to really having a full-fledged project like that? Is that like a 6-month duration? Is that a year? Like how long does it take for you guys?
Every game is different. This game in particular, I think that Josh probably made a playable prototype of that game sometime in 2020, probably late 2020. And we were testing it pretty regularly all throughout 2021. And we began the process of commissioning art for that game early in 2022, I believe. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really when a game goes from an idea to a real project. That's when
Mm-hmm.
we start spending money on it, is basically when we start buying art.
Got it.
So
Got it.
our typical design process is about 18 months from the time that we greenlight a game for development, which, like I say, is kind of the time when we start spending money on it, to the time when that game is expected to be in the hands of players. This game, probably a little bit longer, maybe 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then plus all of the work that Josh did before he started making a game about it, which is, really hard to estimate.
When it comes to creating a new product or a new game, I mean, you guys have been doing this in a repeatable fashion, right? And you've raised
Yep.
millions of dollars using crowdfunding. For someone who's just kind of starting, the idea of launching something from scratch is like so intimidating, right? And I know that one thing you guys do is these weekly meetings, right? To really coordinate the Kickstarter. how long do you think people have to be working on a project per week to really begin to make progress on it, to really get it to a point where they can launch something?
I would say that our Kickstarter process has evolved rapidly in probably the last year. And it's a lot better, I think, than it used to be. In the past, we basically had two tracks of work. There was a game design track with a team that was building a product, and then there was a Kickstarter track that was the team that was preparing to run the campaign. And there were always conversations and discussions going on between those two groups to try to make sure that everybody was coordinated and in sync. But it was really like having two silos. And there's positives to that and negatives to that. The positives are that both groups can move at their own pace. They don't have to wait for the other group. But the negatives are that you don't always get the best synergy between the campaign and the product. You miss out on opportunities sometimes where maybe you could do something in the product that makes a really cool feature in the campaign, or maybe you want to do something in the campaign and that provides a suggestion to the designers of the game for a feature that they might not have otherwise have thought about. So for Let's Go, we intentionally merged those two groups together, and we had a regular meeting of a lot of different people on the design team and people on the marketing team, people on the production team, some members of the leadership team. That group met every week, and those meetings started in, I would say, the spring of 2022. So we just ran this campaign. So it was about a year of those meetings. And when they start, they're not super complicated. It's a lot of check-ins and milestones and discussions. And the meeting runs a half an hour to an hour at the most. And some weeks the meeting is 10 minutes long. Everybody just says, no change from last week, and then they're done. But as you get closer and closer to the campaign, that meeting became a real focus of our company's effort. And I think that really paid off. This campaign succeeded, I think, at a lot higher level than some of our previous board game Kickstarters have done. And I really attribute a lot of that to the fact that we had such an engaged group working on it for so long.
What if someone comes to you and like, Ryan, I love that idea and it sounds cool, but like at the same time, doesn't that take some of the fun out of producing something, right? Like to do all these meetings and milestones and stuff like that. What do you say to creators who come to you like, I don't know, like if I can do something like that, it sounds kind of like intimidating and very like business-like. What do you say to people like that?
Well, a long time ago, I used to tell people that were interested in being in this business to ask themselves the question of whether they wanted to publish their own game or see their game published. And a lot of people don't want to publish a game. They want to see a game published. They want to see their game on the shelf. With crowdfunding, those lines became pretty blurred because it became a lot easier to publish your own game than it had been before crowdfunding was available. Now I kind of tell people, do you want to see your game on a shelf? Do you want to participate in the project, or do you want to publish your own game from scratch? Do you want to run your own crowdfunding campaign? And I think different people fall into different categories. Some of the people that we work with, they don't want to have anything to do with it. They want to design a game and then license it to us, and they're on to their next project. They don't even think about it again until it shows up as a prototype or as a pre-press version for review and approval. Other people, very engaged. They want to be involved in every aspect of the project from start to finish. And I think it just depends on what your mentality is and what you're really interested in. And there are people you can work with who will slot into every point along that continuum. If you're interested in being very involved, you can find people to be very involved with you. If you don't want to do anything except design a game, you can find people that'll be happy to do all the rest. You just got to get out there and talk to a lot of folks and figure out what works best for you.
So it's kind of like deciding which role you want to play, and regardless of what that is, being the best, right, in that role. So if you feel like you can't maybe do another role very well, maybe handing that off, right? But not half-assing or not cutting corners just because you want to get something out there, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's seen those ads where the guy shows up in the hospital and performs neurosurgery, and somebody says, "Are you a doctor?" And he says, "Well, no, but I spent the night in Holiday Inn." Like, it's publishing games is a very difficult business that requires a lot of institutional knowledge and skill. It is not something that most people can just do because they think it would be fun. A lot of people try that. Crowdfunding is littered with projects that were big on ideas and small on fulfillment. It's a lot harder than it looks.
If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you, and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfillrite, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist and it's free, you can go to fulfillrite.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist, fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately. One of the other things that you mentioned in our pre-interview is this idea of when you're working on an offer, always kind of revising it until it's actually, truly compelling, like trying to always get better and better. I think a lot of people think like, okay, I'm going to make the page and that's it. But it sounds like you have a different kind of process there. Maybe you could just speak a little bit about that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you do any reading on how to do marketing or how to do launch a product, you're going to hear people talk about unique selling propositions. You're going to hear people talk about what is the core idea of your brand. What are you really selling people? And I think that that is all true. And I think that creators need to spend time and really work on those issues. It's as important in some level as the rules of your game or any other part of your project that you might be working on. In the book business, people that are booksellers will tell you that a huge percentage of the reason people buy books is the cover art. Now, that's a little bit less true today than it was 20 years ago because a lot of books are now bought electronically. But in the days when you would go to a bookstore and browse for a book, if you didn't have a great piece of cover art, you were not going to sell as many books. And if you did have a great piece of cover art, you might sell a book to somebody that might not otherwise have looked at it. And that's the same thing that happens with games, except it's not so much about a visual image as it is an idea of what you're selling. And with Let's Go, we started off with this really, really great story about Josh and his trip that he didn't get to take and his whole idea about, I want to turn that negative into a positive. But I think every game on some level has a kernel of an idea like that. There's something about it that was special enough that caused that creator to want to spend the time and energy to turn that idea into a game. And sometimes, those ideas aren't great. There are a lot of people out there that make a game just because they want to, or they really like some other game and they want to make their version of it. That's a really hard sell. But if you've got a really compelling idea of why you did something, figure out how to explain that to a potential backer. Make the game title reflect that. Make your tagline reflect that. Make your art reflect that. You're telling a story. You want people to be engaged and really interested in what it is that you're trying to sell them. They've got lots and lots and lots of options of things to spend their money on. And you're basically asking them to take some of their hard-earned cash and give it to you. There's got to be an exchange there. What are they doing it for? Why do they care? Make them care, and they'll be a lot more willing to back.
So many years ago, you made this decision right after having worked in this industry and having done a lot of different stuff to really, plow into AEG, right? And to really make that a huge focus in your life. Why do you feel like that was worth it to you? Do you have a memory or do you have something you look back on and be like, this is why this is a really worthwhile choice, or this was rewarding to me? Do you have any memories like that that really stand out in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I have a very unusual work history, and this is a very unusual situation. When I first started working in the tabletop gaming industry, I worked with John Zinser, the guy who founded AEG. He and I did a lot of business together, although I didn't work for his company at that time. We were working together on a lot of projects. We co-founded some companies together. We were working together at Wizards of the Coast. So John and I have been friends for a very, very, very long time. And the timing was right and the fit was right. They needed me and I needed a place to go. And so it was just kind of a wonderful set of coincidences that all kind of conspired to get me here. And I'm really happy to be at AEG. I feel like working with people that I have known for a long time in a business that I'm very familiar with, making products that I really like, are just kind of where I want to be in my life right now. And so for me, it's just a really good set of circumstances.
So would you say almost you being willing to work with other people and kind of put yourself out there, and also just being open-minded, right, about opportunities, that's kind of that mentality has led you to this point right now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've done some really really interesting things in my career. I've been very very lucky, extremely fortunate, and when opportunities have arrived, I've had the ability to say yes to a lot of exciting things. And I encourage people to take that mentality that when life gives you a really extraordinary opportunity, if you can, you should try to take it.
Well said. Well said. So I just have one or two tactical questions for you here. So, in your experience doing these projects, do you feel like there are any really silver bullets, or do you feel like there are any things that a creator must 100% do in order to stand the chance of having a more successful campaign? Do any things come to your mind in terms of strategy or techniques or things they absolutely should be focused on if they really want to do well with a campaign?
Yes, I do. Um, so one of my fundamental beliefs about crowdfunding is that the crowdfunding platform, Kickstarter or wherever you're doing your crowdfunding, that is a place where you monetize your community. That is not a place where you build your community. You are not going to launch a Kickstarter and then attract a lot of people to be interested in it. You have got to put in the work before you launch your campaign to have already generated interest and awareness in your project so that when you launch, those people are activated and will come and be your backers. Once your campaign is up and running and you are accumulating backers, then there is an opportunity to tap into the wider network on the platform and sell your idea to people who might not otherwise be aware of it. But if you are not making a big impact on the very first day that your campaign launches, your campaign is very unlikely to succeed. And the only way to have a very good first day is to have built that community before you launch. So
Well said.
tactics that I recommend, absolutely work on building your mailing list. There's probably no single asset that any crowdfunding campaign has that is more valuable than its email list. Whatever
Mm.
you can do to get people to subscribe to your newsletter or give you their email in exchange for the right to send them a small, limited amount of marketing is invaluable. And then I would say the number two thing that you need to be thinking about is social media advertising. And you can either do that with a partner like BackerKit or Green Inbox or GelOp or any of the available companies, or you can do it yourself. But the mailing list is something you're going to use to help you build out your social media campaign. And so it's kind of a situation where you've got to have that mailing list in order to make everything else work. So yeah, I really encourage people to work on building that community before they launch their campaigns.
In the tabletop category, what are people typically promising? Is it like to a print and play version? Is it to learn more about the game? Like, what would you promise typically in that category?
Are you talking about to build a mailing list, or are you talking about the campaign
Yeah,
itself?
yeah, to build a mailing list.
Well, I think a lot of things have been tried, and some things that used to work don't really work that well anymore. And so people are constantly trying new things. Obviously, people don't like to get a lot of spam. So asking somebody for an email address is kind of making a contract with them that you're not going to be a bothersome presence
Be
in their
annoying.
inbox.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I think the best mailing list builder that I've ever seen was run for a campaign. I think the campaign was Tang Garden, but don't quote me on that. And the deal was that if you subscribe to their mailing list, they would arrange to have a seedling tree planted in a reforestation effort. So
Wow.
every person who joined their mailing list was basically contributing to regrowing a forest somewhere. And that product was about plants and gardening. So there was a great connection between that offer and that campaign. I think they did tremendously well with that. I think that core idea of we'll do something in a way that is beneficial to somebody, maybe it's you, maybe it's the world, who knows, whatever it is. We're going to do something beneficial in exchange for you sharing your email with us. I think that's a really good, strong value proposition. For Let's Go to Japan, we offered people that subscribed to our newsletter or joined our mailing list a expansion of game content that otherwise would not be widely available. So that was just kind of a nice way to say thank you for joining the list. Obviously, you have to be really careful with that. You don't want to create a situation where people feel like there's content that's been locked away that they can't get, because a lot of people that are crowdfunding backers are completionists. They can't get everything. They don't want anything. So you've got to have a whole plan for how to manage that content as the campaign runs. I've also seen, people that just are super engaged on social media and super engaged on Discord, super engaged on Board Game Geek. They go to the places where gamers hang out and they build a rapport. And when they ask for people to join a mailing list, people join because they're comfortable and familiar with that person. I think the absolute paragon of that is Jamie Stegmaier at Stonemaier Games. That guy has built a personal brand around being a really good guy who says interesting things. And he gets a lot of people to follow him just because, he's good at what he does.
Yeah, love it. Love it. One other quick tactical question I had for you, and I think this is actually something that's kind of almost a misconception and also kind of hotly debated, honestly, in the industry, which is this idea of reward tiers. And, everyone has seen these campaigns with like dozens of rewards and early birds and super early birds, right? You guys have a very interesting take, which is you're very unique in having kind of a minimalistic, right, reward design. What are your thoughts and attitude towards rewards?
If it weren't for human psychology, I would have one reward. I pretty much have a product that I want you to buy from us, and I would prefer that you just back that thing. But that is not how human brains work. So there's a ton of data and psychology that will point you towards the idea that selling people things requires context. And one of the things you can do to provide context on a crowdfunding platform is your reward tiers. So often we will offer at least 2 reward tiers, one being a very basic version of the product, and then one being the more deluxe version that we really hope that you'll back. And our business is kind of driven like that anyway. We will eventually make a retail version of a lot of these products that will not be as deluxe as the Kickstarter version. So we can kind of preview the retail product at the same time we're offering people the Kickstarter version. And what that does is when you look at the Kickstarter version and you say, why am I going to pay $69 for this board game? If we also show you the retail version at $39 and you see the difference between what you would buy if you went to a game store and what you would get if you backed it on Kickstarter, your brain makes a connection about value and is able to say to itself, oh, I see, that is much more reasonable. But if we just show you the $69 version, your brain says, why would I ever pay $69 for a board game? And then maybe you don't back. There's a few other things we do. So Kickstarter in particular has a built-in reward tier. You can't get rid of it, which is basically the back anything, the back at any amount reward, which I hate with a white hot passion. My feedback to them has been endless about how they need to get rid of that, but it's there. The problem with that reward is that it's a thing that Kickstarter just kind of puts on every campaign, but there's no deal for that pledge. So we usually add a very low dollar reward, a $1, $5 reward, which essentially is there to provide people who have a concern that they will be allowed to make a late order for the product after the campaign ends on the pledge manager. We will get, if we don't have that pledge level, we will get a certain number of people asking us every single day if they will be able to access the campaign after it's over on the pledge manager. And by putting that low dollar value reward in there, it just gets rid of all of that. That loop. They just know the answer. So that typically our boilerplate is to have those 3 rewards: a really, really low reward, a retail reward, and a deluxe reward. Some of our campaigns are a little bit more complicated and they do have more features, and we will sometimes end up with additional reward levels, especially if we are doing an expansion campaign for a pre-existing game. When we do that, we will often end up at least with one level, which is kind of an all-in reward for the person who wants to get everything all in one pledge. But I try to stay away from that stuff you mentioned, the early bird rewards, the late backer rewards, the special Monday pledge. I think that stuff is super confusing. I don't think it generates a lot of pledges. I think you end up with a lot of questions from your community. My opinion is it's not helping. It's just adding friction.
Yeah, I really appreciate your perspective, and I do think it's very category specific, but I really like your take on it, and I appreciate you for being very transparent with that. So we're coming to the end of the interview. Where can people go, first of all, to learn more about your game and learn more about your other products as well?
Absolutely. So our main website is alderac.com, ALDERAC, alderac.com. And we have a page on that site /Kickstarter that has a list of all of our crowdfunding campaigns if you're interested in any of the things we've run in the past. And you can find us on Twitter at Alderac, and we're on Facebook at Alderac. So we're pretty easy to find.
Awesome. And my final question for you, having done, like I said, so many campaigns and really having seen a lot of success, and you've seen what works and what doesn't, is there a final tip, a final bit of advice? Could be a quote that you like even, or just a word of encouragement to other creators that are out there. And we can end on that note, and I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, my word of encouragement is to absolutely go for it. We live in a fantastic time when it is easier to do this than it has ever been at any time in the history of our industry. And I just love to encourage people to live their dream and give it a shot.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Ryan. Really appreciate it, and look forward to your next launch.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman, and thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the podcast. I really appreciate you and your time. And every single week, hopefully you're making progress towards your goals. I know that this is something that I am obsessive about. I love surrounding myself with success stories. I love tuning into self-education, self-improvement, and really anything that can kind of move me forward towards the goals in my own life. So I hope that in listening to today's episode, you at least feel a little bit closer towards those goals, which you're striving towards, which you're achieving, trying to achieve, whether it's raising funding for your company that's making a big splash, getting the name out there, building a brand from nothing, or attracting investors around the world who are as passionate as you are about your mission, about your values, and about the way in which you want to impact the world. I think that this is such a difficult and confusing process. And if you ever kind of, try to, trek really difficult terrain or try to go hiking, right? It's so much easier when you're trying to hike if you actually have a map. And it's even more easy if you have a guide. And this is something where you want more hand-holding. You really want more insights as to how to actually do one of these campaigns, maybe even decide if this is right for you, or if you're just like hell-bent on this, you are so all in, you are 10 out of 10 for launching an equity crowdfunding campaign, and you want the complete strategy, everything you need to do to get your ducks in a row to really make it big, right? To do a campaign that not only kind of is surprising to you, but also attracts eyeballs, gets people actually noticing you in your industry, builds your brand and credibility, and also gets not only those investors, but also evangelist customers. If that sounds like something that you want, and you want some help in executing this, and also to get some guidance along the way, you got to book an individual one-on-one coaching call with me. I'm telling you, man, this is literally the best investment which you can make. I've had students who, after my call, literally raised thousands of dollars on different crowdfunding platforms. So honestly, this is one of the best ways which you can dot your I's and cross your T's. I think it's also incredible for people out there that have a budget to work with. I have a lot of students who also became clients of mine in different ways when it comes to agency and helping them with their different projects. But regardless of where you are, having someone, a trained eye, to be able to assess your project, to really dive into my entire library of content in my head, all of the different tactics and resources and tools and strategies that are proven to work, I can literally draw from since being in this industry since 2012 and apply that to your crowdfunding campaign, all in one simple 45-minute session. I can't tell you just the amount of value that I pack into these sessions. So if you do want to book your individual coaching call, make that scheduled ASAP. All you got to do is go to the link I'm about to mention, fill out the form, and you can get that call booked right now. Go to the link at crowdcrux.com/coaching. Again, that link is crowdcrux.com/coaching, crowdcrux.com/coaching. Tell me a little bit about you, what you're trying to accomplish, and tell me more about your startup at that link, crowdcrux.com/coaching. Wherever you are hailing in from, whatever your goals are, I appreciate you for being a part of my community. Thank you so much for tuning in every single week. Please leave me a positive rating and review on iTunes, or if you're listening to this on YouTube, I love you guys on YouTube. Give me a thumbs up as well on this video. But thank you so much. Again, my name is Sal, and I will see you next time.